You have 12 hours to make the payment or you lose my mom. My stepdaughter shouted when she sent me the bill for her vacation trip. I refused to pay. Then she called her mom and lied to her about me having an affair with her friend. Strangely, my wife, her mom, believed her and immediately demanded divorce. But this was just the beginning. What happened next was rather unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Mike Branson from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. It started with a text message. Nothing more. Just a buzz on my phone as I was sketching out a floor plan for a downtown loft project, one I'd been pouring my energy into ever since Vanessa and I hit our 6-year mark. The screen lit up. Kylie. I paused for a moment, already feeling that quiet tightness in my chest I always got when her name appeared. Even though I'd tried for years to build something close to a relationship with her, she never gave me anything back but suspicion and the kind of cold, polite resentment people reserve for unwanted guests. Still, I opened the message, expecting a question, maybe a request for help with something minor. What I saw instead made me sit back in my chair and stare. You have 12 hours to make the payment or you lose my mom. Attached was a screenshot of a $3,800 invoice from a luxury resort in Tulum. I read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. There was no please or can you help. Just a demand, a threat, an ultimatum as casually thrown into my life as a tossed match into dry leaves. I rubbed my temples and leaned forward, trying to breathe through the sudden rush of heat that spread across my neck. Was this a joke? A test? I texted back a simple question. What is this? Her response came instantly. You promised to take care of us. This is your responsibility. If not, I'll tell Mom what you've been doing with her friend. In that moment, it felt like the air shifted in the room. Everything went still. My stomach knotted so violently I had to stand up and walk away from the desk. I stared out the window, watching traffic crawl through the city, my thoughts scattering like broken glass across the floor of my mind. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even spoken to Vanessa's friend Lisa in over a year, and our conversations had never been anything more than casual, awkward small talk at holiday parties. But Kylie wasn't bluffing. She never bluffed. She didn't need facts, just fire. And she'd just lit the match. I didn't respond. I didn't send the money. I didn't even try to argue with her. What was the point? By nightfall, Vanessa was standing in our kitchen with shaking hands and blood in her eyes. You lied to me, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, but it cut sharper than if she had screamed. You've been sleeping with Lisa. Kylie told me everything. I saw the messages. I blinked, stunned. What messages? I asked, genuinely confused. Vanessa didn't answer. She just threw her phone at me, screen turned off, like the evidence didn't matter anymore. The verdict had already been read. I'd always known Vanessa trusted Kylie more than she trusted me. I just didn't know how quickly that trust would be weaponized. All those nights I listened to her vent about her ex-husband, all the dinners I cooked when she came home exhausted, every silent sacrifice I made to help her daughter feel safe and supported, they all dissolved in a single evening. I tried to speak, to reach her, but it was like arguing with a fire alarm. The house was already burning. I want you out, she said. I want a divorce. And don't try to make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't. I packed a bag. I left the next morning. People think heartbreak is loud, that it wails and begs and knocks over furniture. But mine was quiet. It curled up in the corners of my chest and whispered, you should have seen this coming. I moved into a short-term rental near the river, barely furnished, with a creaky bed and cold tile floors. At night, I'd sit in the silence and try to figure out what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or how easy it was for Vanessa to believe it. She didn't even ask for the truth. She just handed me my walking papers like I was a temp who'd overstayed his welcome. I didn't tell anyone right away. I just disappeared from the parts of my life that involved her. Our mutual friends noticed. A few reached out, but I ignored most of them. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. I wasn't even sure I could. There was no dramatic blow-up, no cheating scandal on my part. Just a spoiled adult child with a sense of entitlement, so bloated she saw me as a bank account with a pulse, and a mother too eager to believe her own narrative to question any of it. That truth sat heavy on my chest every morning like a sleeping animal I couldn't push off. It wasn't until 3 weeks later, sitting across from my old college friend Jared at a greasy diner off 11th, that I finally said the words out loud. She chose her daughter, I said, pushing eggs around my plate. Jared looked at me, eyes narrowing. No, man. She chose fear. Kylie manipulated her. That's not just choosing a daughter. That's refusing to see the truth because it would mean admitting you were wrong. I didn't answer. I just stared at the cracked linoleum floor and let that sink in. I didn't want to hate Vanessa, but some part of me knew I could never look at her the same again. Trust, once broken like that, doesn't rebuild. It remains fractured, even if you try to tape it back together. I wish I could say that was the last time I heard from either of them. But Kylie didn't stop there. She started telling people I'd been emotionally abusive, that I tried to isolate Vanessa, that I was controlling, passive-aggressive, manipulative. Lies, all of them, but dangerous lies. Ones that grew legs and walked into rooms I wasn't in. I lost a couple clients. A few friends stopped returning calls. And still, I stayed silent. Not because I was guilty, but because I knew anything I said would look like retaliation. I wasn't going to play their game. What hurt the most wasn't the loss of Vanessa. It was the realization that I had never been anything more than convenient. I was a steady paycheck, a handyman, a reliable ride, a warm body in the bed when things got cold. But loyalty? That wasn't part of the deal. As soon as the wind changed, I was tossed overboard. And Kylie had lit the fire and watched it burn from a rooftop with a glass of wine in hand. I'd given 6 years of my life to that family, and they ended it with a text. 12 hours. That's all I was worth. I didn't expect silence to be so loud. After the divorce papers were signed, the world around me didn't collapse. It just paused, like everything had shifted 1 degree off center. I remember waking up the morning after I left Vanessa's house, sitting on the edge of that cold rental bed, and realizing for the first time in a long while that no one expected anything from me. No text from Kylie demanding something. No passive-aggressive comments from Vanessa about how I never understood her daughter. Just silence. And still, even in the quiet, I kept replaying the confrontation in that kitchen over and over again. Her face. The way she didn't flinch when she called me a liar. How her voice cracked when she said, "I can't believe you would do this to me." But she did believe it. That's the part that broke something in me. She did believe it, without hesitation, without investigation, without even asking for my side. The so-called proof she waved around that night turned out to be screenshots, badly edited, painfully obvious fakes that I could have disproved in 5 minutes if she had even wanted to hear it. They were messages Kylie claimed she found between me and Lisa, a friend of Vanessa's I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Vanessa wouldn't let me see them. She just shoved her phone in my face, locked on a text that read something like, "You looked so good last night. I can't stop thinking about what we did." I blinked at it, confused. "That's not even my number," I said, but Vanessa didn't care. Her face had already hardened. "Don't insult my intelligence," she snapped. Kylie showed me everything. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about truth. This was about control. Or worse, fear. Vanessa was terrified of losing Kylie, and I was just the collateral damage she was willing to sacrifice to keep her daughter close. It's a strange thing when the person you love looks at you and sees a villain. Even stranger when they want you to be one, because it makes their decision easier. Vanessa needed a reason to justify the resentment Kylie always carried toward me. I'd seen it in the small moments. The way Vanessa flinched when I tried to correct Kylie, the way she'd rush to smooth things over instead of holding her daughter accountable. I was always walking a tightrope in that house, trying to be supportive without overstepping, trying to protect my own peace without appearing indifferent. But none of that mattered. The second Kylie pointed the finger, Vanessa didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger like she'd been waiting for an excuse. And then came the fallout. Within days, mutual friends stopped reaching out. Lisa, the woman at the center of the lie, blocked me on everything. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. Vanessa must have sent out a mass warning, painting me as some predatory creep who couldn't keep it in his pants. Kylie, of course, played the grieving daughter. Her Instagram lit up with vague, cryptic captions like, "Loyalty isn't complicated, and people show you who they are, believe them." The comments were full of sympathy. "Stay strong, babe. You deserve better." I watched it all unfold like someone watching their own funeral from afar. There I was, alive, breathing, but already buried under a story someone else had written. I tried, briefly, to reach out to Lisa. Not to beg or plead, just to tell her the truth. I left a voicemail. "I don't know what Vanessa told you," I said, "but I've never disrespected you, and I've certainly never said those things. I hope you'll think about the kind of person I've been over the years before believing this garbage." She never called back. I don't blame her. Vanessa had known her for over a decade, and I was just the husband she tolerated. I never stood a chance in that equation. And that was the painful part, how little it took to erase everything I'd built with them. 6 years, gone in 6 days. Jared was the only one who didn't flinch. He came over one night with a bottle of bourbon and 2 plastic cups, sat on my beat-up couch, and said, "Tell me everything. No judgment." I told him. Every word. The text. The screenshots. Vanessa's meltdown. He listened, nodding slowly, and when I finished, he leaned back and said, "She was looking for a reason to leave, man. This just gave her the out." I didn't want to hear that. But he wasn't wrong. Somewhere deep down, I think Vanessa had been quietly resenting the compromises she made when she married me. I wasn't flashy. I didn't spoil Kylie. I had rules, boundaries. And boundaries were the one thing neither of them could tolerate. Still, part of me hoped, foolishly, that Vanessa would come to her senses. That she'd question the absurdity of it all. That she'd remember who I was. But weeks passed, and the silence remained. I saw her once, briefly, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She looked away the moment our eyes met. Like I was a ghost. Or worse, an embarrassment. And that's when it finally clicked. She didn't just believe the lie. She needed to believe it. Because if she admitted the truth, that her daughter fabricated the whole thing, then she'd have to face what kind of person Kylie really was. And that, I realized, was a truth Vanessa would never be strong enough to face. So I let go. I stopped checking her socials. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I focused on work, poured myself into projects that kept me up late and distracted during the day. I reconnected with people I'd lost touch with, started going to the gym again, even joined a book club just to be around conversations that weren't soaked in accusation. And slowly, painfully, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of me who tiptoed around a woman and her bitter daughter, but the man I was before all of it. The man who deserved peace. But peace has a strange echo to it. It doesn't erase what happened. It just muffles the noise. At night, when the city got quiet and the world outside slowed down, I'd still think about Vanessa. Not because I missed her, but because I couldn't believe how little it took for her to choose Kylie over me. How fast it all crumbled. How easily I was discarded. I wondered if she ever lay awake thinking about it. If she doubted herself. If even for a second, she regretted the way she handled it. But then I remembered her face that night. Stone cold, certain, furious. And I knew the truth. She never doubted it. Not then. But she would. And when that day came, I knew it would be too late. It took longer than I'd like to admit to unpack the last box. Not because there was so much of it, just 3 modest boxes and a suitcase, but because every item was a reminder of the life I used to have. A coffee mug Vanessa gave me when I landed a big client 2 years ago. A set of framed photos Kylie had given us one Christmas, back when she still pretended to tolerate me. A half-burned vanilla candle we kept on the nightstand. I stared at each thing longer than I needed to, caught in the tension between what they meant then and what they meant now. Eventually, I left most of them in a storage bin in the back of the closet. Some memories are better boxed away than carried into a new life. The apartment was smaller, just under 700 square feet, but it was mine. The walls were still bare, and the furniture was mismatched. A leather love seat Jared loaned me, a second-hand dining table with uneven legs, and a mattress on the floor until I could figure out a bed frame. But there was something about the bareness that felt honest. Nothing here was pretending to be perfect. Nothing smiled for appearances. It was raw, and it was real, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. I could breathe without waiting for the next emotional ambush. The hardest part wasn't being alone. It was realizing how much of my life I had lived for someone else's comfort. I kept thinking back to all the times I'd silenced myself to keep the peace. When Kylie would make jabs at dinner and Vanessa would shoot me that look, silently pleading, just let it go. And I did. Again and again. Because I thought that's what love looked like. Compromise. Patience. Grace. But now I saw it for what it was, quiet erosion. The slow wearing away of who I was. All to protect the fragile ego of someone who never intended to return the favor. Starting over meant facing those compromises head-on and finally asking myself who I was when no one was watching. Work, oddly enough, became my sanctuary. The clean lines of architecture, the logic of blueprints, the precision of measurements, it all made sense in a way people never did. I buried myself in designs, took on extra projects, even picked up freelance gigs to keep my hands moving and my mind distracted. My coworkers noticed the shift. "You're putting in crazy hours," one of them said during a late-night meeting. I just shrugged. What else was I going to do? Sit at home and refresh Instagram to see what Kylie posted next. I'd had enough fiction in my life to last a decade. Still, even as I tried to move forward, the shadows followed me. Vanessa and Kylie weren't content to just erase me. They needed to repaint me as the villain. Stories filtered through mutual friends. That I was emotionally distant. That I resented Kylie for being Vanessa's daughter. That I'd manipulated Vanessa for years, isolating her from her support system. I heard it all secondhand. Nobody said it to my face. But the looks changed. The invitations dried up. The group chats fell silent. It was like social exile, subtle but complete. And I realized then that lies don't need to be believed by everyone. They just need to be loud enough to drown out the truth. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Jared sitting on my front steps with a six-pack and a look on his face that meant something was coming. Vanessa and Kylie were at Lucia's birthday party. He said, not bothering with a hello. Kylie got wasted and started ranting about you in front of everyone. Said you were a narcissist, that you gaslit her mom. But then she slipped up. Said something about how she made up some things to protect her mom from disappointment. He handed me a beer. People noticed. Lisa walked out of the party. Didn't say goodbye. That was the first crack in the armor. Small but real. And it wasn't mine, it was theirs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't post a cryptic quote online. I just sat there, listening to the night traffic, beer cold in my hand, and let the silence speak for itself. Let the truth begin to breathe, however slowly. And in that moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. So damn tired of being the bigger person. Of holding back. Of letting other people control the story. But I also knew that chasing justice in this situation was like screaming into a hurricane. The only peace I could have was the kind I gave myself. Still, life has a funny way of nudging you forward even when you're standing still. A few weeks later, I was at a local networking event, sipping lukewarm wine and trying to avoid small talk when I met Elena. She wasn't flashy or overly charming. Just real. Grounded. We started talking about design theory, then old buildings, then books. No flirting. No pressure. Just human connection. It was the first time in months I spoke to someone without feeling like I had to explain who I was or what had happened. I didn't tell her about Vanessa or Kylie. Not yet. That part of my life didn't define me anymore. It was just something I'd survived. In the quiet after that night, I started writing again. Just journaling, nothing fancy. But it helped. Seeing my thoughts on paper made them feel more manageable. Less like a storm in my head and more like a map I could trace. I wrote about the betrayal, yes, but I also wrote about what I'd learned. About boundaries. About trust. About the cost of giving your loyalty to people who haven't earned it. And for the first time, I stopped asking why Vanessa didn't believe me and started asking why I needed her to. Because that's what starting over really meant. Not rebuilding the same life brick by brick, hoping it would hold this time, but letting it all go and building something entirely new. Something mine. No more performing. No more shrinking. Just quiet, steady progress. And in that stillness, I found a new kind of strength. One that didn't need to be loud to be real. One that came not from being believed, but from believing in myself again. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing people rarely talk about when it comes to lies. They unravel slowly. Not in grand explosions or dramatic confessions, but in small, almost forgettable ways. A detail that doesn't quite fit. A name dropped at the wrong time. A slip of the tongue in a room too quiet. That's how the cracks started forming in Kylie's story. Not with a bang, but a stutter. And once they started showing, they spread fast, like hairline fractures in a windshield that had been hit too hard by truth and pressure. I didn't see it firsthand, but word got back to me, one uncomfortable whisper at a time. The first sign came from Lisa, of all people. The same Lisa I was falsely accused of having an affair with. Jared told me about it. He ran into her at a gallery opening, and they exchanged a few stiff words before she pulled him aside and asked, "Do you think Marcus ever really did it?" Jared, God bless him, didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I never did." Lisa nodded slowly. "Yeah, me neither. I've been thinking about some things Kylie said, and they don't add up." That was it. No big apology. No reckoning. Just a seed of doubt planted in a place it had no room to grow before. But now, it took root. From there, more stories came. Vanessa's cousin reached out, someone I hadn't heard from since the divorce. She sent a short message. "Hey, I know this is weird, but Kylie's been saying some stuff that doesn't make sense. Just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're doing okay." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to ask what exactly Kylie had said. Another part of me was just glad someone else was finally seeing through the fog. I replied simply, "Thank you. I am." Because I was. Maybe not whole, maybe not healed, but steady enough to stand when the truth finally started leaking through the cracks. The real fracture, though, came one afternoon when Vanessa showed up at Jared's office unannounced. He told me the story later that night over drinks. Said she looked pale, like someone had sucked the wind right out of her. "She asked me if you were seeing someone," Jared said, shaking his head. I told her I didn't know. Then she asked if you ever hated her for believing Kylie. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to respond to that. Vanessa was the one who made her choice. She had 9 months to reach out, to ask questions, to revisit the lie. And she didn't. Not until it started costing her something. Not until people around her began pulling away. Because Kylie, it turns out, wasn't just lying about me. She was lying about everything. Apparently, she had told Vanessa she was working part-time at a nonprofit while finishing school. In reality, she had dropped out months ago. She was living off Vanessa's credit cards, partying in Miami one weekend, LA the next. There were photos, stories, drunk voicemails left on mutual friends' phones. Vanessa's friends started talking, quietly at first, then openly. "She's using you," one of them finally said to her face. "And she's dragging you down with her." And just like that, the carefully constructed illusion Kylie had built started to crumble. Vanessa, caught between maternal instinct and mounting evidence, began to spiral. I saw it for myself one afternoon when I ran into Vanessa at a bookstore of all places. I was browsing near the back, flipping through a copy of a memoir I wasn't really reading, when I heard her voice. Soft, hesitant. "Marcus." I looked up, and there she was, smaller somehow, thinner, like the weight of her choices had pressed her into something less than what she used to be. Her eyes welled up the moment we made eye contact. "I didn't expect to see you," she said. I nodded. "Me neither." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all the things we hadn't said. She finally spoke, voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first. Just looked at her, trying to see the woman I once loved underneath the wreckage. "About what?" I asked, not unkindly, just tired. "About Kylie," she said. "About everything." I sighed and gestured toward the coffee shop next door. We sat in awkward silence for a while, both of us nursing drinks we didn't touch. Then she said it, the thing I thought I'd never hear. She lied. About the texts. About Lisa. About all of it. Her voice broke on the last word. I found her journal. She wrote about how easy it was to convince me, how proud she was of winning. I stared at her, unsure what she wanted from me. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have trusted you." Hearing those words didn't feel like I thought it would. It didn't bring relief. It didn't undo the damage. If anything, it felt hollow. Because her apology came not from revelation, but from consequence. She believed Kylie because it was easier. Because it protected her. because it spared her the guilt of confronting the truth. And now, with her social circle shrinking and her daughter's mask slipping, she wanted me to hold space for her regret. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. I've already forgiven you, I said, and I meant it. But that part of my life is closed. Vanessa blinked, stunned. So that's it. I nodded. That's it. We left the coffee shop without touching. No hug. No lingering glance. Just a quiet goodbye from two people who used to share a home, but now only shared regret. And as I watched her walk away, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad. Not for me, but for her. For the woman who once had a partner who would have moved mountains for her, but chose instead to believe a lie because it asked less of her than the truth did. That kind of guilt doesn't go away. It lingers. It haunts. And I knew, in some deep part of me, that she'd carry that with her for the rest of her life. But I wouldn't. Not anymore. Chapter 5, The Call. The call came on a Thursday night. One of those gray, sluggish evenings where the sky felt heavy and the air outside was thick with the scent of rain that never quite fell. I'd just gotten back from a client walkthrough, kicked off my shoes, and was halfway into a reheated bowl of leftover pasta when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I normally don't answer those anymore. Too many spam calls. Too many memories I don't need crawling back through my speaker. But something in my chest told me to pick up. Something quiet and gut deep. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and hit accept. What I heard next knocked the breath out of me. Marcus. It was Vanessa. Her voice cracked on my name like it had gotten stuck in her throat. I didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, spoon in hand, heart thudding like a drum that hadn't been touched in months. Please, she said again, softer this time. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I took a breath, set the spoon down, and walked to the window. You're not wrong, I said, voice low but steady. She was quiet for a second, like she wasn't sure how to take that. Then she said the words I never thought I'd hear. I made a terrible mistake. I believed a lie, and I lost the only man who ever truly loved me because I couldn't face how broken my daughter really is. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cool glass. Rain had finally started to fall, pattering against the pane like a soft drumbeat. Why now? I asked, not out of curiosity, but exhaustion. Why not 9 months ago when I was sitting in that cold apartment, trying to piece myself back together? Why now, when I've finally moved on? Vanessa exhaled sharply, almost a sob, but not quite. Because I couldn't see it then, she whispered. I didn't want to see it. You were the safer one to blame. You always were. You didn't fight back. You didn't make noise. You just left, and I let you go because it was easier than admitting I failed as a mother. There was a long silence between us then, one that held everything we didn't say after the divorce. All the anger, the confusion, the heartbreak. I didn't fill it. I just let it sit there, heavy and real. Vanessa broke it eventually. Kylie moved out, she said. After I confronted her about the journal and the lies, she screamed at me, said I ruined her life, that you were the enemy because you never treated her like a princess. Then she left, took my car, maxed out my card. She hasn't called since. I don't even know where she is. Her voice was shaking now, unraveling. I was so blind, Marcus. And you paid the price for it. I swallowed hard. Not out of pity, no, but because I knew what it felt like to be used, and now, for the first time, Vanessa knew it too. I'm sorry, she said, and this time I could hear the weight in it. Not just for what I believed, but for how I handled it, for how easily I threw you away. I turned from the window and sat down on the edge of the couch, heart hammering. Vanessa, I said carefully, I don't hate you. I never did. But forgiveness doesn't come with a reset button. I can't go back to what we were. I've worked too hard to rebuild myself from the damage we did to each other. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing, slow, uneven. I want to try again, she said finally. To earn your trust back? To show you that I can be better. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. It's not about you being better, I said. It's about me knowing what I need now, and realizing that being with someone who believed the worst of me without question isn't love. It's fear, and I'm done living in fear. I could hear her sob then. Not loud or dramatic, just the kind of quiet crying that comes when someone realizes they've waited too long. There's no space for us anymore. I continued, softer now. I've forgiven you because I needed that peace for myself. But that forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean reconciliation. It means I wish you well, from a distance. And I mean that. Truly. I hope you heal. I hope you find your footing. But you and I were done. It was the hardest boundary I'd ever set, and the most necessary. I'd spent so long keeping the peace for other people, but that moment was for me. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Vanessa tried once more. Even if I did everything differently now? She asked, her voice a threadbare whisper. I smiled sadly. Even then, I said, because you believed her, Vanessa. You chose her story over mine. And even if that made sense to you at the time, it broke something in me. Something that doesn't come back just because you're sorry. There was nothing else to say. Eventually, she murmured, "Goodbye, Marcus." And I replied with the same. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time after, not sure how to feel. Relief, grief, closure. All of it mixed together like colors that didn't quite blend, but made something undeniably honest. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just sat there, staring into the soft, rainy night, and realized the call wasn't about getting her back. It was about setting both of us free. She finally saw the truth. But I'd already built a life without her in it. And that life was quieter, yes, but it was mine. Chapter 6, The Boundary. It's strange how the loudest chapters of your life can close with silence. No fireworks. No final confrontation. Just the quiet turning of a page. After Vanessa's call, I kept waiting for some kind of emotional aftermath to crash into me. Rage, grief, maybe even a touch of satisfaction. But none came. Just stillness. Not numbness. Not indifference. But a kind of emotional clarity I hadn't known I was missing. Like I'd finally swept out the last cobweb from a room that had sat in shadows for too long. I didn't replay her voice. I didn't second-guess what I'd said. I just moved on. Not with defiance. With intention. I started walking more. Mornings before work, evenings after dinner. Just me and the sidewalk and the world that had gone on spinning whether my heart was breaking or not. There was a park near my building, small, tucked behind a row of coffee shops, and I found myself there almost daily. There was a bench that faced a pond, where ducks floated lazily and kids fed breadcrumbs against the rules. I'd sit there with a cup of coffee and watch life happen. Real life. Not the curated nonsense Kylie used to post, not the toxic comparison game Vanessa had once drowned in, just real people being. No pretenses, no performance. And slowly, I realized that this simple, overlooked pocket of peace was more honest than any home I'd shared with them. Jared stopped by one afternoon, carrying a box of my old things he'd been holding on to since the divorce. Inside was a photo of me and Vanessa from our second anniversary, her arms around my neck, both of us smiling like we believed in forever. I stared at it for a long time before setting it face down on the counter. "You okay?" Jared asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." He gave me a look. The kind that asks the deeper question. "Are you sure?" I nodded again. "I don't miss her. Not the way I thought I would." I paused, then added, "What I miss is the man I thought I could be with her." That version of me deserved more than what he got. It wasn't bitterness anymore. That had burned itself out months ago. What I felt now was a deep sense of resolve. I'd made mistakes, sure. I'd overextended. I'd tried too hard to win love that should have been given freely. But I'd learned. The hard way, maybe. But I'd learned. And now, I guarded my peace with the kind of reverence people usually reserve for priceless heirlooms. I no longer let people near me just because they used to be close. Proximity wasn't a qualification. Loyalty was. Integrity was. Consistency was. If someone couldn't show up with those things, they weren't getting a seat at my table. Not anymore. It wasn't long before Vanessa tried to reach out again. A text this time. Just a single line. "Thinking of you." I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it without responding. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. I had nothing left to give her. I'd already returned the ring, the keys, the years. I wasn't going to return my peace. She had her closure the moment I told her the truth wouldn't bring us back. If she didn't want to hold it, that was her burden, not mine. One Saturday afternoon, I volunteered at a mentorship event for young professionals in the city. I'd signed up on a whim, thinking I'd just answer a few questions about architecture or career planning. But somehow, The conversation turned to life choices, relationships, integrity. One young guy, barely 22, asked, "How do you know when to walk away from someone you love?" The room got quiet. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and answered from somewhere deeper than I usually go. When staying means giving up the best parts of yourself. When love becomes a transaction instead of a place you can rest. When truth becomes negotiable. That's when you walk. He nodded slowly. So did a few others. And in that moment, I realized something. My story, ugly, messy, unfair, was useful. Not just a wound, but a lesson. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars, the air crisp with that early fall chill. I passed by a bookstore, stopped inside, and browsed without purpose. I ended up buying a journal. Not for keeping track of pain, but for documenting what came next. The good, the calm, the people who showed up and stayed. Because healing wasn't just about closure. It was about being ready when better finally arrived. And I knew better was coming. Not a perfect partner or a dramatic love story. Just better friendships, better boundaries, better peace. Weeks later, I ran into someone new at that same bookstore. Her name was Riley. We reached for the same book, laughed, and started talking. No sparks flew. No grand romantic montage. Just an honest, easy conversation that led to coffee, then more talks, then the slow, careful start of something grounded. I didn't compare her to Vanessa. I didn't tell her about Kylie right away. I just let the moment be what it was, new, quiet, and mine. That was enough. Now, when I look back on that text Kylie sent me, "You have 12 hours to pay or you lose my mom," I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude. Not because of the pain it caused, but because it ended a lie I didn't know I was living. That ultimatum didn't ruin my life. It freed it. It revealed everything I needed to see to make a clean break. And in the wreckage, I found something priceless, myself. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, then watched them come back when it was too late? Marcus's story reminds us that forgiveness is not an invitation. Peace is not permission. And moving on isn't about hate. It's about finally choosing yourself. If this story hit close to home, tell us in the comments. What boundary did you set that changed everything? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories of family drama, betrayal, and the quiet strength of self-respect. See you soon in the next story.